Alright everyone, Minneapolis video number 3. Well, I mean, it's no longer the Minneapolis riots and has nothing to do with George Floyd or police. At this point, it's just people going crazy. At this point, it's just an unruly mob. It's a bunch of anarchists, communists, and a bunch of people with racial animus towards white people in general, or civic animus towards, the power or the establishment or whatever. They got Trump derangement syndrome, so they want to burn the tire warehouse to the ground. Anyway, if the Democrats right now had any dignity whatsoever, they'd be rebuking this. You can literally find comparisons, although lesser ones, arguably, at this point. I mean, Ferguson, the riots that were in Ferguson, the first night were definitely as bad as the ones we're seeing now, but after that, by and large, had been controlled by the second night. You remember, the first night of what amounted to the actual riots, they were burning cars and stuff. I was watching the Vice live stream. Back when Vice's live streams were watchable, they had that one, Ukrainian reporter on there, and she would talk to people, and it was very charming and stuff. And I watched that, and it was violent. The next night, it was not so much. Occasionally, you'd hear a shot fired. Occasionally, somebody would bash a window in. There was some exchange of, tear gas and rocks, but by and large, it was a much smaller crowd. It was 1/10 the size the next day. This time around, it has only grown, and the other thing is that it's no longer a single city event. With Ferguson, 90% of all of the problems were just in Ferguson, just in the first couple of nights. In this case, most of the problems have been over the last couple of nights, days after the fact, and some of it not even in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. At first it was Minneapolis, then it spreads out from one zone there to the rest of the city at large and also St. Paul. Then it spreads to Atlanta, Louisville, now to Dallas, New York, and so forth. It's funny because New York City is run by the far left, but the NYPD is actually, it seems to be the one metro police force capable of actually quelling the unrest. You get Michael Moore calling this a rebellion. Dude, when you start using language like we're the rebels, this is the rebellion, the revolution or something, I'm telling you that the average American, despite the echo chamber that some of you people live in, the average American does not support you. My initial cold take of this entire case was largely just sympathy for George Floyd. That was before the first night of rioting. Then, of course, you have people breaking windows in Atlanta and other cities, and it's okay, what does this have to do with your initial grievance? It's not a protest, it is a riot. And they're branding it as a revolution. And Michael Moore, you realize he just had his documentary attacked by the far left environmentalist crowd. He no longer even counts as a true far leftist. It's sort of like Bernie Sanders almost got left behind by the far left, actually. Until he switched around his views on immigration and guns, he was he wasn't even the furthest left for a while there. He had to outmaneuver other young upstarts that went off the rails even more than he did. Beto ORourke was upstaging him when it came to immigration and planning to literally rip the border wall apart, saying, oh, we don't even need a fence there, people should be able to walk across. And he would do his stupid evangelical, speaking in tongues, gyrating around, I'm a Pentecostal sort of thing. That's modern politicking, I guess, from the left. Of course, now he's I think, grown a beard, and he looks like a washed-up dude now. It's funny because I think that was basically his midlife crisis run for the presidency. I really think that's what Beto was doing. Beto ORourke had a midlife crisis and said, oh, I want to be president of the United States, first Gen X president, technically. Obama semi-aside. And, he's like, oh, I would have done it too if it weren't for you meddling kids, because he gets shafted by his own party. It's funny because I predicted he was a flash in the pan, and a lot of the Beto fans swore up and down that wasn't the case. Same with Klobuchar, and Kamala, and Bernie Sanders, and Buttigieg, unfortunately for the Democrats, because I still think he would have been a better candidate than demented Biden twice his age. I'm getting off the rails, but what do you expect at this point? This is almost like we're getting into the territory where the news cycle's gotten so weird I should be doing a daily live stream instead of individual videos almost. The only reason that I don't do that is because I don't like that long-form format quite so much, because at some point it tends to devolve just into Q&A, and I know people like the audience participation, but I can only do that for so long. I'm an ADHD kid, so my focus tends to wander. You may have noticed after 4 or 5 minutes into my videos, I tend to rant, like I'm doing right now. There's a reason for that. Also, I'm hyper-caffeinated. Oh man, I brew the best coffee. You should try it sometime. All the weak pussy coffee out there can suck my ass. But yeah, the Democrats aren't going to rebuke the rioters. They should, though. This should be a moment where they're like, okay, you've made your point, police brutality, whatever, orange man bad, but, the Democrats prefer to see the nation ripped apart. It's just like they like the fact that the coronavirus lockdowns persisted and damaged the economy. Although they're ending now, clearly the lockdowns are over because nobody's respecting them at this point. Or I should say, law-abiding people, the people that aren't a problem for society, can be counted on to always be the ones that are abused by bad legislation that disproportionately affects them because the dregs of society will ignore it. This is why I oppose all gun control. Repeal the NFA. Get rid of all bans on imports, manufacturing. Yes, you should be able to 3D print an automatic weapon in your living room. It should be perfectly legal. No weapons should be registered. Fuck it. Fuck the government. It's a libertarian perspective. I say this again, I'm going to vote for Trump, but even him, he's still soft on guns by my standards. But people should be defending themselves. The Democrats should act with some degree of dignity at some point, but instead Joe Biden comes out and says, oh, Joe, understand the grievance. Trump has stoked hate for so long. This is just the natural boiling over. No, this is the result in part of blue state extended lockdowns and police brutality involving a city run by Democrats and a state run by Democrats with a Democratic majority legislature and a Democratic police union. That has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Some people, even Trump fans, are like, well, why isn't Trump doing something? Dude, if Trump were to literally send in the troops, don't you think that all of these people would use that as a talking point? If someone gets shot, it's Trump's fault. He's being a tyrant. He hates black people or something. He's being an authoritarian will be their new buzz term. It's funny to see them use that term for somebody who wants to repeal regulations and lower the tax burden and leave people alone. It's interesting how he's the authoritarian, but people that want to disarm and censor you, they're supposedly freedom lovers or liberals or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's so dumb that the linguistic toxicity, the obvious linguistic psyops, the propaganda, the linguistic mimetic warfare going on is pretty sheer at this point. Anyway, if he sends in the troops, he gets labeled a tyrant. And if things go wrong, if it's not effective or something, then it just makes him look bad. Right now, though, this is just happening in a bunch of Democratic-controlled cities, often in Democrat-controlled states. He's going to sit back. I hope that Trump sits back. You know what I would do? Here's what I would advise Trump to do. I would tell you to make an address right now and tell the American people these lawless riots are clearly at this point, they have nothing to do with George Floyd, who I sympathize with. They have nothing to do with police brutality. These are mindless thugs who just want to steal things and burn your community to the ground. I advise U.S. citizens to use proper means to defend themselves and take care of this issue since these metro police forces run by Democrats clearly are not capable or willing to do so. I cannot send the troops in, and you should give some vague constitutional or ethical reason for that and then say you can do it. You get rid of the rioters. I will pardon anybody who is reasonably defending themselves and their property. Put the fear of God into these rioters by making it clear that you'll do what Joe Biden's people are doing for the Antifa members with bail, promising to pay their bail fees using campaign funds. Why don't you promise that law-abiding citizens that are accosted by rioters will be shielded from persecution and prosecution, even though Minnesota and some of these states have duty to retreat laws and draconian anti-gun legislation? You should nullify this legislation by promising a blanket pardon on any federal level charges resulting from these things. Tell the DOJ to stand down and actively defend these people indeed. Go after these states. Sue them. Sue these states. If a state's police forces and even state guard are not willing or able to defend the people, and you are also at the same time not allowing those people the ability to defend themselves effectively, that state is illegitimate. The state government of Minnesota and the city government of Minneapolis at this point are non-functioning entities. The governor and the mayor there are assholes. They are not doing their job. They're not upholding the Constitution. They're not upholding state law or federal law, and they should be done politically. They need to be forced out of office. There should be protests there already, and I mean real protests. I don't mean a mindless mob burning McDonald's. I mean 10,000 people should be on the lawn in front of the city hall of Minneapolis right now, with signs saying Jacob Frey needs to go, fucking resign. That's what needs to happen. And when they inevitably get rocks thrown at them by a bunch of miscreants, Trump should step in and say, don't worry, if you defend yourselves, that's okay. I'll weaponize the DOJ, and I'll go after these people myself. You take care of the streets, I'll take care of the courtrooms. That's what Donald Trump should do. Be really, really popular. He'd definitely win Minnesota in the election. That's about all. Peace out.